Sabrina. Born and raised in Montreal, Quebec. I come from a very tight-knit family. I have one sister who's 2 years older than me. I would say that my upbringing was a semi-religious one. I did spend a lot of time with my grandmother on my father's side growing up, and she was a religious woman. We used to go to church on Sundays, had catechism classes, so we did our, the baptism, the first communion, the confirmation, and prayed daily. So yes, I would say my upbringing was a semi-religious one. I do have a lot of memories from my childhood. Of course, like celebrating Christmas and Easter. There was always the Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny aspect of those holidays, and then you also have the more religious view of those holidays as well. And our family, we did celebrate the more religious views of those holidays. And I do have a lot of fond memories of praying with my grandmother, praying for our relatives that have passed away, also praying the rosary as well. I would say that I did happily identify myself as a Catholic at the time. We did read the Bible, we learned it in church on weekends, but I would say that I identified myself as a Catholic quite happily. My relationship with Jesus, peace be upon him, as a Catholic was a pretty strong one at the time growing up. I would say that daily prayers were absolutely important. I couldn't go to sleep without, praying that night, or else I would have like a guilty conscience. It just became like a habit that I had since, as I grew up, even as I became, a little bit more distant from the religion and, didn't attend church every Sunday as I got older. But I did always pray. That is something that I always kept as a daily thing. My views of Islam prior to converting, I was a teenager, of course, at the time, so I didn't really have a lot of knowledge of, different religions. I would just, the media did influence a lot of my opinion. I was quite ignorant to the religion and what it stood for and, what Islam really was. I just felt like it was something really foreign. Of course, I had, all the misrepresentations of the religion. I did have a negative view towards it based on the media and all the events that had happened. For example, the events of 9/11, right away you see this is a, Islam is labeled on this type of thing. So when someone's ignorant of the religion, you're going to look at an event like that and say, well, why would the religion condone this? Why would Muslims condone this? So for sure I did have a negative view, which was of course all misrepresented, but I did have a negative view of Islam prior, as a teenager. My quest for Islam really began when my grandmother passed away, because she was, the main part of me, of the, all the religious aspects of my life growing up. When she had passed away, I was a teenager, and like most teenagers, I was very, I did pray every night, of course, but I was very distant from the religion at that time. And when she had passed away, it was almost as though, the same way you get into a car accident and you don't really ask for it. It's like it forces you to wake up, because we're always postponing those thoughts of, what's after life, what is the purpose of life. And when you're a teenager, that's the last thing on your mind. Even though you might have, spiritual feelings towards, religion and God, of course you're gonna, you're too busy with your social life and such things. Whereas when she passed away, I felt like it just forced me to wake up and look at my life from outside of the box. And, I was, ashamed with what my life was at that time. And I felt that, I should be reflecting, in action what is in my heart, because I did have, a huge, spiritual side that I felt that I was always neglecting at the time. I came across the Holy Quran, not necessarily in a specific event. Of course, when I had decided I was wanting to learn more about different religions and learn about Islam in particular, of course I did look to, the Quran. I did a lot of online research where, of course, you see a lot of, good and bad, of course. So I did prefer books at the time. I was given an English version of the Quran, and this was all prior to me converting. I would say a good year and a half prior. And of course I read it, front to back. And yeah. The particular verse that I would say that inspired me in the Quran was, the fact that there's a whole chapter named Maryam. Of course, as coming from a Catholic background, you're like, oh, this is so familiar to me, and then everything that, you know, specific verses that talk about the Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him, of course, that, you know, resonated with me, you know, coming from a Catholic background, and the concept of Jesus. I would say, you know, once I learned that from the Quran, I felt that it totally changed my whole aspect. You know, my whole view of being a Catholic was totally shattered after reading Surah Maryam. My view of hijab prior to learning about Islam, I would see Muslim women wearing it. I would assume that they were, you know, either forced to wear it, or, you know, that it was some sort of, you know, written in stone rule that, you know, it's like maybe they didn't want to wear it, but they felt that they had to as Muslims. So